Hi everyone, Oli here, and this is my review of The Smugglers, the first story of the fourth season of classic Doctor Who, starring William Hartnell in his penultimate story as the first Doctor. The Smugglers is also the 28th story overall, 4 episodes long, and is written by Brian Hales. The Smugglers is also another missing episode, and all 4 episodes do not exist in the BBC archives. But there's a handful of surviving clips, and thankfully they aren't the 8mm clips that you've seen in previous missing episodes. But these clips are the Australian censor clips because when the Smokers and other stories aired in Australia, they decided to get rid of some parts that they thought were a bit inappropriate for younger viewers. So the plot of the Smokers is as follows. The TARDIS land arrives on the coast of 17th century Cornwall, much to the astonishment of Polly and Ben. Pirates led by Captain Samuel Pike and his henchman Cherub are searching for Captain Avery's treasure, while a smuggling ring masterminded by the local squire is trying to offload contraband. So the smugglers. I first watched this story around this time last year. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I recently rewatched it, and it's safe to say my opinion of this story has mellowed. The writing of the story was fairly good, the direction was decent, there were some good moments, even though you couldn't really see them. Even the telesnaps, you couldn't see them for the telesnaps, but obviously when you're watching it through loose cannon, you can see how they put the captions underneath, and that was, I think the moments in there were quite good. The script was good, the plot was fairly alright. I mean, it was a fun pirate story with treasure hunts and the few political-ish aspects with the smugglers and all that there. I mean, there was a Spaniard there, and there was a Spaniard there, and I think there was a man called Jamaica in there. Even though, but yeah, it was a good plot. I mean, even though the Doctor and Ben and Polly were caught up in the middle, the sets, judging by the telesnaps, they were very good. I liked the crypt; it was very creepy, and I think that's where most of the big scenes took place. Especially like the episode 3 cliffhanger and most of episode 4, because I think Avery's treasure was hidden there, and I think the clues were was inside the crypt. It looked, and obviously from the telesnaps there was some location filming, and then the 8mm homemade clips made by I don't know who it was. They even featured some of the location filming and some of the behind the scenes stuff like that. I think they even captured the part when they were filming, when they were even filming the story itself. I mean, I think it featured one of Pike's men carrying the Doctor and taking him to Pike himself on the ship. And some of it was actually used in loose cannon recon. The acting was very good as well. William Hartnell was good as usual. I mean, the strength of his story, he doesn't really have to do anything. He can, what he lacks in, what's it called? He can't really carry the, he can't really do much because of his health and the issues and all that. But what he says isn't, he says and the little things he does is enough. I mean, as you saw in previous adventures, and this adventure, for instance, this is a good example. And the Carols and Michael Craze, this is their first, second story as Ben and Polly, but this is the first adventure in the TARDIS, and they were very good here, I must say. I mean, I liked how they were written here. They actually contributed a lot to the story. I liked the scene where Ben and Polly tricked that boy, I think his name was Tom, who was guarding them, and by tricking him by thinking that Polly was using. It was a very funny scene as well, how they were tricking, how they were using magic, and then back then they were superstitious in what Polly was saying. They were very superstitious about all witchcraft and stuff like that, and that was a very good scene. And it also shows how Polly was very well educated as well, and it definitely gave her that boost, that characterization she needed, as well as Ben as well. I think he definitely got some good parts in it as well. I mean, he's, like I said before, he's pretty much like the action man here. I mean, he does some action scenes himself. I mean, he attacked the Spaniard and got into a few fight scenes in the story. But yeah, it was quite good. I mean, they were very. I think this is the story that they're well established here, and I can actually see that everyone was having fun with the story, even though the pirate acting, they were very, it was very piratey. It actually reminded me of Pirates of the Caribbean, even though this is pretty much Pirates of Cornwall. But I think Michael Craze and Anna Crowe actually named this their favorite story because They actually because what they had to do. I think they said that because they filmed on location. I think that's why they named it their favorite. Okay, so moving on. In addition to the fun of the story, in addition to the fun, this story was also quite gory and very violent. There were a lot of deaths here, and they were quite graphic. And all the surviving clips of this story were pretty much of people just dying. And for the other stories as well that have surviving clips, most of the surviving clips have characters dying or threatening moments. And this story actually had a lot of deaths, and the clips actually featured a lot of deaths as well. No, well, such as Jamaica's death. I mean, Captain Pike pretty much just stabbed him point blank, and then we just see he used the sword. Did he? Yeah, I think he used his sword or his hook to kill Jamaica, and then oh yeah, it was his sword, and then you see like Pike just wiping the blood off with his Jamaica's blood on his handkerchief, just throwing it on the ground, and then the camera just cuts to Jamaica just dead on the floor with his eyes wide open. That was quite scary as well. And then there are other deaths as well, such as Pike killing Cherub. That was a very gory scene as well, and yeah. And I actually liked it. I mean, it was definitely showed how violent it was back in those days, and yeah, it was very enjoyable. I'm not saying that I enjoyed seeing the deaths, but it was a good concept to have in the story. The side characters were very good. So the focused ones, I think most of the focused ones there, like Pike, Cherub, Cooper, and Blake, I think they were the ones that actually stood out in my eyes. Cherub and Pike, they were the main villains of the story, and they were quite good. I mean, I was also quite sad when Cherub killed Cooper. I mean, I actually liked Cooper because how he was helping the Doctor in parts of the story. You know, when I was watching it for the second time, even though I knew Cooper died, it was still a bit of a shock because I actually grew to like Cooper. He was a very cool guy to have around the Doctor. And I also liked Blake. He was also a very good character. He was played by John Brigham, who played Tloxel in the Aztecs. I mean, Tloxel was pretty much the big bad of the Aztecs, and here John Brigham's character is actually the good guy, and he actually helps the Doctor, Ben, and Polly. And it was a very good concept to have. And also it was very interesting. But Blake was a very interesting character, even though he was like behind like the smuggling ring, and that was pretty cool as well. The Squire, I also forgot to mention him. He also stood out as well. He was a very good character. I actually thought he was the bad guy, but then he kinda redeemed himself towards the end when he realizes that the Doctor, Ben, and Polly weren't involved in that murder of that church guy in episode 1, even though that was Cherub's doing. You know, Paul Whitson Jones was very good. He does come back to Doctor Who in The Mutants in 1972, and he plays the Marshal, who was the big bad of that story. I also liked how, in the end of this story, how it leads up to the beginning of the 10th planet. It was very mysterious, and at the time, viewers didn't know what was going to happen, but little did they know that the Cybermen were going to appear. But as we go to this now, we obviously know that the 10th planet is the first Doctor's final story and the first appearance of the Cybermen, so we do know that a lot of stuff is going to go down in that story. But I do have my problems with the Smugglers, although it's quite minimal compared to when I first watched the Smugglers. I mean, the first time I watched it, I was actually using Who Recons, the animated people on YouTube. I mean, I still do like them, but I did think that sometimes they don't really do, even though because of the limitations of the software, it does come up as a bit confusing in what they're doing. You pretty much have to like follow the script online of that story to see what actually happened. And obviously, I did use loose cannon this time, and it was a lot clearer. But the problems still do remain. For example, I do feel that the Doctor did escape from Pike's company a bit too early, and he reunited with Ben and Polly a little bit early on in episode 3. I mean, it would have been better if they reunited around like mid episode 4, the last story, at least the beginning of episode 4, or something like that. Maybe have the Doctor pretty much tell them the clues, the clue of what actually where the treasure was, but then the churchman actually told the doctor about the clue about Avery's treasure, and then when the doctor Ben and Polly were going towards the crypt, and then that's when they realized where the treasure was, judging by the names of the tombstones that were there. I mean, pretty much the Avery's treasure plot was pretty much resolved by the end of episode 3, and then the smugglers plot actually comes in around episode 2-ish, 3, and I think the smugglers themselves come into like mid episode 3, and they were only just there for some reason, and then I think they do get into a bit of a fight with Pike's men, and then in the midst of all that, the Doctor, Ben, and Polly decide to like escape back into the TARDIS. And another thing with the smuggling plot was it was a bit unclear, to be honest. I mean, I wasn't really sure of what was going on, but I think this story was more about the hunt for Avery's treasure more than it was the smugglers themselves, even though Blake was pretty much behind the smuggling ring, and the Doctor, Ben, and Polly are pretty much focused on Avery's treasure and also trying to get back into the TARDIS. But aside from that, I initially gave the Smugglers 3 out of 10 because I didn't really like it, but now I'll give the Smugglers a 7 out of 10. It was pretty good and is very well done on my rewatch, and I'm glad my opinion that the story has mellowed. The next story on my reviews will be The 10th Planet. As I mentioned before, this will be William Hartnell's final story, and the first appearance of the secondary Doctor Who villains, and of course my favourite Doctor Who villains ever, the Cybermen. So thanks for watching this review. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and watch my previous videos and reviews. Now tell me what you thought of the Smugglers and what you thought of this review, and I'll see you around.